One more and then I'm all set. Okay.
All right. I'll call this meeting of the Area Plan Commission to order for March the 4th, 2025. And we'll call the members, please, Liz.
Dan Sheets,
Here.
Walt Minnick,
Yes.
Andy Bailey is absent, although we expect him at some point. Jeff Chenoweth,
Here.
Chad Colby,
Here.
and staff members Liz Stitzel and Kat Bell are present, as well as Jay Moore is present via phone.
All right, our first order of business is the disposition of the minutes. Has everyone had a chance to look those over?
Yes. I make a motion to approve minutes.
Second.
Have a motion and a second.
Was that Jeff was my first or my second?
Yes.
Just
First.
Kat was my second.
All in favor of approving the minutes as written, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carries. Do we have any old business?
Oh, yikes, I'm so sorry, we do not.
Very good. Well, in that case, we'll open our hearing up for application CC 2025-00067, docket 02-25-RZ, petition of United Way of Clinton County for rezoning. Liz, would you take us through that?
I will. As you noted, the applicant is United Way for Clinton County. The request is to rezone land from the agricultural zoning district to the B1 neighborhood business zoning district. This particular site is zoned agriculturally, as is everything around it except some land to the east that is high-density residential. This is a 5-acre site. It's on the west side of Mulberry Jefferson Road between 0 North South and 100 North in Washington Township. This site has an existing church, Cornerstone Assembly of God, which is in operation there, and the petitioner is wanting to rezone because they would like to operate a Class 3 daycare, child care center in the lower portion of the existing church structure. If the application is approved and all the approvals from the state are obtained, then the church will continue their current operations in the upper level, and the daycare will be in the lower level, which they will lease from the church. Which is why it's not considered an accessory use to the church as a religious organization, as a side point, because a church could run a daycare as a secondary operation that was accessory, but in this particular case, it's a separate entity that's, for profit. In a church, it's a religious exemption, so they're not the same. So the area around the site, as mentioned before, is ag. That small section to the east, zoned high-density residential, is a mobile home park. And this site's a little over a mile north of the unincorporated town of Jefferson, which is now annexed into the city of Frankfort. There has previously been a daycare in operation here as part of the church, but staff's unsure what services it offered or when it began operations to even determine what its status would have been as part of the church. The staff's not aware of any complaints that ever occurred relative to it, so there wasn't a reason to spend time researching it. I do remember back when I was hired, there was something there, with kids that would play outside sometimes. This new proposed daycare will be under a different entity than the church, leasing part of the building. And due to the requirements for the B1 zoning district, if this request is approved by the county commissioners, then the petitioner will be required to seek special exception approval from the Board of Zoning Appeals. The reason we advised B1 despite that two-step process is severalfold. First off, we want to make sure that the church itself can continue running without any issue with their legality. And then secondly, many of our business districts allow auto repairs and other big industrial things that would not be appropriate on the same site as a church or across from a residential use with a number of homes. So B1 is very limited in what kinds of businesses can be in it, and they're pretty much things that are compatible being right next to houses. So this way, there's not a situation where it runs away into some other use that might be detrimental. That's why we went with B1, and this special exception gives the opportunity that there's any additional concerns, those can be addressed by the BZA at that point in time. So, whereas it would have been very difficult to recommend moving forward with something that could result in an industrial or a heavy commercial use in this spot. So in terms of analysis, there's 5 criteria that both the Plan Commission and the Commissioners should pay reasonable regard to. First is the most recently adopted comprehensive plan. The Washington Township Future Land Use Map in the 2012 Clinton County Comprehensive Plan designates this as an ag area, but also notes that Washington Township has a lot of diversity in land uses. Under Infrastructure and Services, Goal 4, Objective 5, strongly encourages the provisions of necessary child care services in the county, including adequate zoning regulations for daycare facilities. Given that this site is in close proximity to the West State Road 28 corridor, which is experiencing a struggle with their high expectations for additional workforce, a daycare in an existing structure that has a history of having had that use and is operated by a licensed entity would seem to support those goals. 2, the current conditions and character of the structure and uses in each district. So mentioned this a bit a moment ago, but B1, neighborhood business, does seem fitting because it is the least intense option that would allow a path for approving a large daycare. And this daycare will share its use in the same structure as a church, which is also a permitted use in the B1 district, so the change has no negative effect on the religious organization. The remaining areas around the site are ag and residential, so again, neighborhood business would seem consistent, or most consistent. 3, the most desirable use for which the land in each district is adapted. So the ground is zoned ag, currently has a church on it that formerly had a daycare. The plans for the proposed added use will not be any more intense than what the uses on the site in the past have been, and will have hours of operation that will be typically normal business hours, and that would appear desirable. When this goes to the BZA, that board can also assist in making sure all standards are met, and if there's any conditions that are of concern to the neighborhood, those can be discussed at that time. I would also note, in terms of desirable land use, it's always better to use what you have than to take more ag ground out of production for something else. And many local churches struggle with size of congregation and what it takes to maintain their buildings. So there's an additional benefit in this case in fully using an existing building to capacity that allows a congregation to continue to survive and maintain it without taking more land out of production to build something new. So that's not something we touched on in the staff report, but it kind of is in there. It's a little bit into the reuse category. For the conservation of property values throughout the jurisdiction, the new added use will conduct its operations inside the existing structure. The renovations will occur inside, so the outside will not change. Again, the standards will be reviewed in the special exception process. Finally, responsible growth and development. So permitting the rezoning for adding childcare that is needed, especially close to the 28 corridor, where there's new industrial and commercial development and a push for that. Is not only responsible growth and development, but it's also a positive attraction for Clinton County's increasing growth and freeing up more workforce to be able to work and have places for their children to stay. So consequently, staff recommends to favorably certify the rezoning application to the county commissioners.
Thank you, Liz. Is there anyone here representing the project who would like to speak?
I think it sounded great. The only thing is, we're not a for-profit, we are a nonprofit.
You're not a church though, right?
United Way,
Yeah,
we are
yeah.
a nonprofit, we're not
Okay.
for-profit. That's
So
the only
same
thing.
thing would still hold true, it's not an accessory use to the church under a religious exemption under federal law.
Okay.
So it's a separate entity.
I wondered about that when I heard it, but I was pretty sure you were not for profit.
We're not.
Anything else?
A lot of things, we talked about the industrial park, that's basically what we're doing, is trying to help the industrial park so they can bring, into the community. And childcare, we're a desert area, and for that, United Way's working with phases to build capacity for childcare, and this is phase 1. So, it's taken me almost 3 years to get to this point, so pretty excited about where we've come so far. Mary Kay is actually from St. Matthews, who will be the operating, we are the funder, and so they'll actually.
So St. Matthew Community Preschool's been here for 48 years serving the community, and we're looking forward into being able to expand into an early childcare facility that offers childcare. And preschool stays there.
I'm just going to sum that up because I realized nobody went to the mic. We have people that listen online. So for anyone who happens to be listening online, the representatives for United Way noted that there was an error in the staff report. They are a non-for-profit, not a for-profit organization. And then this is the first phase out of several phases towards providing additional services to families with children to free up available workforce, to be able to provide needed employees for the industrial park.
Yeah, sorry about that. I forgot we're streaming live. So in the future, we'll go to the microphone. Anybody who addresses the board.
I don't want to like scream and yell and wave, but that seemed excessive.
Anyone here in opposition to this rezone? Seeing none, we'll move the discussion to the board. Gentlemen, your thoughts on this rezone? I'll also remind everyone, this is a recommendation to the county commissioners for a rezone. It's not an approval. So,
Well, I'm like Liz, I do remember when there was a daycare there, but, you know, our business used to be in Jefferson. I can't remember if that church, how old that church is, if it's been there 25 years or not, but, it seems like I remember a daycare, but nothing, I don't remember.
Yes, I remember that.
Noah's Ark.
And it's longer than 17 years, because I'm like 17 and a half years with the county now, and that church was there when I was hired.
Yeah.
So,
I also remember the daycare being there.
Right, yeah. So I've never heard anything bad,
Nope.
but, yeah,
I know there's a huge need for it.
absolutely.
Yes.
In class 3, is that what St. Matthews is now?
that's
Class
our,
3?
they're in Frankfurt, so that's a completely different zoning ordinance.
Oh, okay.
In our ordinance, we have class 1, class 2, and class 3. So class 1 is like your very smallest, like a housewife who's watching an extra 2 or 3 kids, you know, with
Okay.
herself in her own
Okay.
home. And then a class 2, I want to say is like up to 10 kids or something, but it's like a medium range. It's usually still in somebody's home. Class 3s are what you would picture when you were like, okay, we're sending 100 kids to the Y for daycare for the day. Like, they don't really have an upper limitation. And they're what you would think of as like a commercial. You go to a destination, not necessarily someone caring for your kid in your home. So all that really means is they're just in the largest class. And the
Right.
state kind of has tiers that are somewhat similar in terms of
Right.
looking at size and
We
limitation.
are licensed with the state. We are considered to be an unlicensed registered ministry. And we have a path to level quality, and we're the highest level of the state. And every year we have to achieve that and prove ourselves through inspections and observations. But we're proud to say that we're PTQ3.
Very
Not
good.
many out there.
Excellent. Walt, anything?
Oh,
No, that's needed. Very needed.
motion, we approve them.
Recommendation to the county commissioners to rezone.
Yep.
We have Walt with the recommendation,
Second.
second from Jeff. Roll call the members, please.
Dan Sheets,
Yes.
Walt Minnick,
Yes.
Jeff Chenoweth,
Yes.
Chad Colby.
Yes.
Okay, so, 4-0, so what'll happen is, we'll have to get some special paperwork together for rezonings, and it'll get forwarded to the county commissioners. They actually just met today, they'll meet again in 2 weeks, I wanna say
On
the
the 18th.
18th. So, Kat should be able to reach out to you to confirm, but it should be on the agenda for the 18th. We should be able to get that paperwork done this week and get that filed. So we'll just confirm. That meeting is at 9 a.m. It's in this same room. So you'll definitely want to attend in case they have any questions for you as well. And they'll be the final decision makers.
Maybe back for phase 3, so.
Very good. Thank you, ladies.
Congratulations.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. All right, thank you, guys.
Our next item on the agenda is a waiver of the filing deadline, 19 days, for application CC 25
And,
0.
I'm gonna jump in on this one.
Okay.
We may be able to save the effort. This application, still doesn't have a set of covenants that are even close
Oh.
to working legally. Jay let us know, today, which he's on the phone too, and I read through them just to kind of see, and they're a mess. There's places they refer to themselves as an ordinance, they talk about things that don't exist in the plat, there's some general confusion. It's more than can be sorted out with like 2 edits that we can clearly clarify. So Jay's recommendation was simply to announce to anybody here that we will address this at the next meeting and give a chance for them to get somebody involved and help them get that cleaned up or figure it out themselves, but that needs to be redrafted. It's such a mess that it's more than what we're gonna pay our legal time to write covenants from scratch
Sure.
for. So it just needs to come back. I know Kat had called them today just to let them know that
And they are here
there were
present.
issues and they're present. So, but having legally sound covenants is a requirement for filing, and these are just, I kind of read through part of them really quick, and they're all over the board. Like, I completely see, you know, what Jay's challenge was, so. So that was his recommendation. Otherwise, if you want to waive and do the staff report and hear part of it, you know, I suppose that's board discretion, but then the recommendation from Jay would be to continue that, because we don't have covenants that are even close to acceptable.
Well, we haven't actually called for the hearing yet, so we just leave it lay where it is.
You could leave it lay and announce that it's just gonna wait, at which point it then would not need a waiver of filing deadline, because it would be in excess of 20 days before it got heard. Or you could waive it, and we could go through the rest of the staff report and then continue it for discretion.
I guess
The
I would
applicant
ask-
is here, and we
ask the
didn't call anyone
applicant.
else, so we could certainly start it.
I would prefer not to go through all of this if we don't have anything ready to go. But I'm certainly interested in hearing what you have to say, and if you could come to the microphone, please.
My name's Paul Edwards. I represent PC Properties that owns the property. We have never wrote covenants and restrictions. Part of what we've done is I've asked my wife to contact a realtor who has sold property down here in Clinton County. And if she could come up with covenants and restrictions, I'd like to look at them, because I didn't know what I was doing. So what I did is I copied and pasted them and thought it was fine. So what we was trying to do was make sure that it was not going to be offensive to anybody in the area, and just not have garbage laying around, junkyards happening, things that you wouldn't want as your neighbor. That's it.
So I guess I would note, Kat had sent you guys like 3 examples that had like basic covenants. There's a ton of stuff in here that is sort of the zoning ordinance restated, and some of it's more restrictive. There was something I saw going through that I actually thought, that's crazy, because if you want an above-ground propane tank, you're now not allowed to have one.
We have deleted that. I have talked to her today about this, and we went through this again. Like the propane tank, I said, when we first started this, it was buried because it was a safety. Because if you have a leak and it had an explosion, it would impact just to the local area of the ground. So we put that in there. That was part of that reason. As we were discussing this, I'm like, well, who's going to fill this tank? Is there going to be a restriction to fill this tank in the ground? So we removed it completely.
Well, and my advice would just be to think about the fact that you're gonna have a reciprocal requirement that your neighbors can enforce it. So
That's
if
correct.
you don't want your neighbors telling you you can or can't do something beyond what the zoning ordinance already limits, you probably shouldn't put it in your covenants.
We went through all of this
So,
with that in mind. 'Cause we
You're
do
not a major subdivision.
Right. We don't know who's going to be there next door, and we started looking at, since we would be there, of how much would this enforce of us?
Yeah.
And that's.
And then you have pieces that sound like you have a homeowners association with votes being assigned, but there's no homeowners association language for an incorporation.
We
So there's,
removed those two.
you know, there's some stuff there, and then you've got,
Like
utility easements for utilities that aren't on the plat, the utilities wouldn't be running across. You have an easement for landowners there, and then you're requiring that drain to go to the county drainage board for permanent maintenance, which they don't accept those. So there's just a lot of things that are confused that need to be sorted.
When it was originally written, we didn't know who would take jurisdiction, because I don't want that on me, because next thing I'm going to be.
Well,
fighting.
you or those property owners would be the ones doing it.
Correct.
By a drain, what are we talking about?
The perimeter drains for the septic
Are they
drain
into a
across.
common tile?
Yes, they'll be coming
Okay.
across, they're putting in the
You
tile.
can ask
to
the
get
drainage
across.
board to take that as a legal drain, but we will not take the individual, I'm the county surveyor. And we will not take the individual taps off of that main. But if you have a main serving, I believe this one's gonna serve 2 lots,
I'll
the
show
board
you.
would take that.
It would
Is
go through.
Creek a legal drain for you? Maybe it is.
Yes, it
Yeah.
is.
So they're running up the back of these
Hmm.
to come in, so the perimeter drains off these two can come across. So, but
I
if
would-
that's the way it's arranged, then you'll need to get in touch with Dan and go to the drainage board and see if you can work out that dedication, and then that all has to be sorted properly on the plat, so.
We could remove whatever you want removed. What we were just doing is putting something on paper to see what was acceptable and not. Because when we started this out, this thing was only a page long. And then it's now, I think, 3 to 4 pages long. So what we didn't want was like a junkyard next door to us to bring the property value down. We thought of our neighbors as well, who's already currently there.
Now, I would note, this won't stop a junkyard from going next door to you, other than the zoning ordinance. It only restricts your land,
Correct.
so.
we knew that when we originally was going through this today, we was realizing that this could conflict with ordinances that Clinton County has. And we started looking and quickly, like the 1,320 foot limit for enforcement, we didn't know that was even there. I even Googled the 1,320, couldn't find it, and that's when I.
It's actually a reciprocal enforcement, and it's a policy within the board that was set a couple of years ago. Because one lot, minor subdivisions, and even 2 and 3 lot, there's not much enforcement in and of itself, and the biggest covenant we require is the ag protection covenant. So the neighboring farmers need to have the right to enforce the covenant if someone in that subdivision decides
I understand.
that they're gonna, sue. So that's, sometimes inside towns, the board chooses to reduce that to like 650, because a quarter mile is like 200 houses, which is kind of ridiculous. But out in the country, it's usually the 1320, because that's your surrounding farm fields and.
But what we would be more than willing to edit whatever out, or add whatever needs to be added. We're just trying to get past that stage. And then when I found out we're required to have some kind of covenant, because I even said today, oh, what happens if we just don't do anything and we just split this thing? Then she told me I need to have some type
Yeah.
of covenant restriction. But
You at least have to have the minimums that we require, which is gonna be your ag protection covenant, because you do have, an easement. Either you've gotta have maintenance and stuff for that, or if you're gonna dedicate it, then you've gotta get that agreement made and have it written that way.
Right.
You've gotta have the basic, there's some at the end, I think severability and some other things that have to be in there, the reciprocal enforcement.
yeah, severability's in here.
We don't require you to do anything about like brick on a house or buried
Right.
tanks, or, that stuff that's above and beyond. You can do it if you want, but we always warn people, like, once you do it, then that kicks in anytime we review something,
Sure.
so make sure you know what you're doing.
Well, under the utility and drainage assessment here, where the easements is in the front, there's power lines. So we give 50 feet off the road and made that part of the easement for if they had to do power line work, to where they have that right. In the back of the drainage, it's gonna go through all lots. It's gonna start off in lot 1, which I believe is furthest to the south, and then goes through, completely through lot 2 into the 3rd lot, which is by 20 to 30 feet, and then drains.
You may wanna think about that, I mean, that explains, we were trying to figure out where the utility easement was, but you may wanna think about that. If you put a 50-foot utility easement dedicated to Duke or whoever the utility is in the area, and they accept that, then your setback will be 100 foot, because you'll have to come back 50 foot off that dedicated easement.
Okay.
For nearest place you can build a house.
Well, the setback is at 50 now on the plat.
Yes, but I'm saying if that first 50 is also, if that's a utility easement, then you're gonna have to come off further. And I don't know I guess I would wonder why you would need 50, because utilities typically
Well, I thought it was.
keep stuff in the right of way.
Right, when I was talking to the surveyor, which was, that's what I was understanding, that the setback was part of the utility.
No, the setback is to make sure there's enough room if the county expands the size of a road and they have to take more by eminent domain, they're not buying your house or septic system.
And I would reckon, I think that's a little big, because I've seen, I don't know who the jurisdiction that is up there, but I saw Duke come through and completely clear a 50-foot right-of-way, or 50-foot easement, and the people lost some nice vegetation.
But there's
Well,
no
that's-
high-powered lines near you, right?
Right now, there's no power lines at all. So that's gonna be another hurdle that we have to clear when we
You may need to
build.
discuss that with Duke before we hear this too. I mean, if you need to put some kind of easement in, you probably need to talk to, and I don't know if it's Duke, whoever your power provider is, find out what they actually need. I wouldn't give them more than what they need, because then you're gonna have to set back your 50 foot from that front
Well, we're
easement.
going completely solar,
So,
so it will not be, yeah, whoever buys it may not. But at where we're at on the furthest lot of the 13.5 acres, it will be completely solar.
Well, it sounds to me like there's some work to be done on the covenants for this project, so it would be my feeling that we just hold off, we don't open this hearing tonight, let everything get squared away, and we hear this again next month.
Owner certificate.
oh,
There's
yeah,
some issues in
looks, there are some issues there. It looks like you guys, copied and pasted, but didn't necessarily read through. You took out 2, which I assume you determined it wasn't useful. But you've got this section in still that you're donating, streets and alleys, and you don't have streets and alleys in your particular subdivision.
I don't know.
Now, the one in here that I thought needed to be removed, stating that the county drainage board is taking dedication of a legal drain. Additionally, you leave that in if you work with Dan to dedicate that additional.
Is that on the
bit-
covenants restrictions?
No, this is under the owner certificate. There's 6 optional phrases in that language in the ordinance that you
It's
will
on the
put in.
plat.
It's in the plat, they're put in if they're applicable, or they're not put in if they're not applicable. And I guess somebody decided number 2 was not applicable. I don't have it in front of me to know if it is or not. But nobody renumbered the others. But then the other 5 that are in here, several of them are not applicable. 6 is applicable. That talks about flood zones, and you do have one, so that completely makes sense. But there's a section in here about improvements. Actually, I think there's 3 of them that relate to either private streets or improvements and dedications of land and streets to the commissioners, and you're not doing any of that. So there shouldn't be anything in the plat about dedication. Now, the one that I thought might not apply about drainage maybe does. Certainly, if you don't want to maintain it and future owners don't want to maintain it and the county surveyor is willing to talk to the drainage board about accepting maintenance, I'm a big fan of anything that
The
can
only
be
reason
maintained
we would
permanently being
accept
that
the
way.
maintenance is to eliminate arguments between neighbors
Yeah.
over who's going to fix it.
Right.
We would just go in and fix it
Right.
and bill them.
And
That's what I
everybody pays
prefer.
into that grant.
Yeah.
That's what I would prefer.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know how to word that, because I thought, well, as soon as somebody's on somebody else's property and they don't correct it back to where it was at, they're gonna be an issue, we're gonna have a fight, we're gonna be in court.
They have to agree to take it.
Right.
So you should reach out to Dan maybe
That's
tomorrow or
We've
something.
got a form we can give you to fill out
I'll do
and
that.
take that before the board.
And then you would just make sure everything in your plat and covenants matched that decision.
Okay,
So,
yeah, the plat was hard to get from the surveyor, so that's why it's been almost a year since we've been here. So,
yeah, you've definitely, the owner's certificate needs some stuff. It's just not got the right items there and not properly numbered. So that was noted on there. And then the rest of it is, the covenants.
Yeah, we were looking
Did
for
you
the,
receive the plat examples that I sent you?
I did.
Present today?
I did.
But you didn't receive them the first time?
first time I seen him was today. But it shows where you've sent it.
But
I don't
yeah,
know
look
happened on
those
mine.
over, and a lot
Yeah.
of these things that's been discussed here, you'll
Yeah.
more than likely see those in
The
those.
basic requirements are gonna be in those. And then certainly, you're welcome to add more if you want. We just always caution people, if you realize later that it's causing you a problem, you have to come back and replat the whole thing. And we've had more than a few subdivisions have to come through and vacate and replat because they thought something was not a big deal, and then it turned out to be a problem with a buyer or something else. So just make sure that you've thought through all the potential unintended consequences and,
Already did that.
so.
Thank you.
My office is just right down the hall here, so we can come up, we can help you out, and get you started.
Thank you.
Do you need a motion, Dan?
No, I don't think so. We didn't actually take any action, so.
We're just gonna let it go to the next
Let it
hearing,
go to
and
the
it'll be
next
under
hearing.
old business.
Yep.
I don't know, Jay, do they need to, since we didn't actually start the hearing and do a staff report, do they still need to officially choose to continue that?
It would look better in the minutes if there was a motion to continue.
All right, so, yes.
Motion.
We have a motion from Jeff. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carries. The application is continued.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And certainly, don't be afraid to reach out to Kat or I. We're willing to try to help you get it figured, but it's just got some work, so.
I'll have to look at that when I get home, because I have barely looked at what they've done.
The ones that I sent you are really, I like reviewing their work, the
Right.
2 surveyors, because they really do good thorough work, so just go through that, and I think that can help you out a bunch.
Thank you.
And some of it too, if you're really wanting to tie back in, some of your stuff too, you may be able to simplify if it's already in the zoning ordinance. You really want to still state in the covenants, you could just state everything must comply with the zoning.
The ordinances, going to just remove it.
Unless you look at it and you go, if the ordinance changed, this would still be important. Some things, like, I doubt the ordinance is ever gonna say junk and debris is okay. But sometimes uses, like those do shift, sometimes what is or isn't
I
allowed.
think that what got
If you
us-
don't want any home occupations, that's a big one. The ordinance allows home occupations, some subdivisions forbid them. Chickens, the ordinance would allow limited numbers of, your zoned A1, so the ordinance would allow limited numbers of livestock as long as they could meet setbacks from neighbors' houses. If you don't want any livestock, think about types and quantity, so some of that stuff, yeah, if you're wanting to further guide
I think
it.
what got like paranoid, and you kind of explained that today, was the last time we met here at the building, the variance expressed concern over the conditions of the two houses, like the end, and we were like, oh, well, if the county doesn't do anything about that, then we need to put that in our ordinances, but now I understand that.
But we haven't
No,
looked at it today.
You
If she
certainly
had just
could,
complained.
like, in multi-lot subdivisions,
To
it's
the right
not
person.
uncommon to have like a clause that says something like, you have to keep things mowed and maintained, or you know, you can't have, you know, dilapidated property, or maybe limiting extreme colors, you know, so that, I mean, it's, there's some discretion there.
And we,
But-
like I said, we've copied and pasted most of that. Works for me.
But yeah, if you wanna
Yep.
get that, maybe get that sorted a little bit more, and then when you get a draft, we can send that back
I'll read those tonight.
today again.
So I told her, I said, it'll take me a few minutes, I'll just do dictation, and that was the other thing, we found typos everywhere. and I
Well,
started
that was
reading it, I'm
the other
like,
thing
oh
Jay
my
said, he was like, there's so many typos, it's like this came from AI, or it was a voice to talk, like
It's voice to
type.
talk on some of it.
So,
And she started reading it, and I'm like, I have no idea what happened.
yeah, and Jay was like, this is just too much to, like,
I thought it looked like a third grader wrote it.
well,
I said,
we
"Oh
weren't gonna
my
tell you
God,
that."
I sent this to Clinton County. Thank you.
Thank you.
thank you.
All right, the next item is new business. I'm pretty sure we don't have any, Liz.
We do not.
Oh, outstanding. In that case, our next meeting is April the 1st, 2025, and anyone like to move to adjourn?
So moved.
We have a, Walt, you second? We have
Yes.
Walt with the second, we're adjourned.
We're out of here.
All right, Jay, thank you.
All righty.
Okey-doke.